mostly of horror and weird fiction, though I have had a little foray into comics in womenthology, which back some years ago when I actually worked in the comics industry for Tender Publishing, for Marvel Age and all the Marvel magazines and various other stuff. My collection is Sleeping with the Monster. It's weird fiction, horror, dark fantasy. And I also do the podcast, The Outer Dark, which is a contemporary weird fiction podcast. We believe that weird fiction is the fiction of the 21st century, and weird fiction is a mode that crosses all genres. And is being driven now by diverse authors. It's not your father's, your grandfather's Lovecraft anymore. At least not the exciting stuff. So I discovered Red Sonja as a little girl too. My dad bought it for me. This was like he bought the Conan and so forth, so we bought that. Though I have to admit that I read less Sonja than I read C.L. Moore's Gerald L. stories, who was, I guess, the real literary equivalent of Red Sonja, as opposed to the one time that little character that appeared called Red Sonja in Robert E. Howard. I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about some of that later.
Okay, Jon.
Hi, I'm Jon R. Osborne. I'm a fantasy and science fiction author. My book, Tempered Warrior, was a finalist for Best Fantasy at the Dragon Awards in 2018. I'm also a longtime gaming nerd, played D&D since 1980, and my love of gaming is how I got into sword and sorcery, and thus was introduced to Coleman and Red Sonja.
Awesome. And I'm so sorry, please, end of the panel. Tell me how you would like to be addressed, which is the question I asked the others before.
Oh, Gerald is fine. I'm Gerald L. Coleman, science fiction and fantasy author, co-founder of the Afro Poets, and fellow at the Black Earth Institute. Red Sonja was probably, while I was a kid reading all of these comics, while I liked, I was a fan of Jean Grey and Storm, the Scarlet Witch. Red Sonja was probably one of the earliest, like, really powerful women in comics that I was exposed to while reading Conan and I don't know if anyone remembers the Warlord comic series.
Yes.
So yeah.
You know, Gerald, that's a great starting point, actually. So, Red Sonja started as a short story called The Shadow of the Vulture by Robert E. Howard, but then she made her comics debut in Conan as a guest character. But what you said that really struck me was this idea that she was one of the first strong women. So my first question is going to be, can we speak about the historical significance and impact of Red Sonja on the sword and sorcery genre? And you can start, Gerald.
I think it's at least for me, it's reflective, because when I'm reading this stuff at 12, 13, 14, 15, I'm not really cognizant of the impact, because for me, I was always surrounded by capable, powerful, smart women. My mother, my grandmother, my aunts, my cousins. So that wasn't a surprise to me, kind of in the sense of reality, but certainly in speculative works, whether it was comics or whether it was kind of the earlier science fiction and fantasy stuff I was reading. So it was really entertaining for me to not just see a character like the Warlord, who was also running around in basically a thong, and Conan. And I don't know how many of you are aware of Charles Saunders and Imaru, which was his kind of Maru was a black character. It was his kind of alternative to Conan. So yeah, those things were there, but for me it was impactful in not seeing, not having that concern in reality, but in the stuff that I was reading that was fiction, and seeing that.
Seeing the separation between your lived experience and the way it was in
Yeah.
fiction,
Yeah.
and that this was a step forward.
Right. Yeah, so I loved reading some.
So, John, do you have anything to say? And by the way, panelists, I am not a strict moderator. If you have something you want to jump in with, please feel free.
Well, for me, I mean, I started reading Sonja and Conan comics originally when I was very young. Unfortunately, I didn't hang on to any of those because before I started collecting comics, they might actually be worse something. But as I said, I was getting into fantasy because of Dungeons and Dragons. I started off as a sci-fi kid, and then I discovered D&D and fantasy. And one of the things that stuck out about Red Sonja that made her different is she wasn't the princess that had to be rescued from the dragon, waiting for a knight to show up. She would pick up the sword and take care of business herself. And so that was pretty awesome to see, someone, see a woman that could do that. So
Self-rescuing princess?
Yes, well, not even
Right.
rescuing as more like,
Avenging.
yeah, good luck trying to get her in that position to begin with. She would just stand up for herself. Yeah. So but I was about to go off on a tangent, but that's for a later thing.
Okay, hold your tangent. If you need to take a note, you can use my book.
Good.
Okay,
Yeah.
Anya,
So the question is the influence on
on the genre.
on the
Yeah.
genre. I'm not a scholar of the sword and sorcery genre, though I have read a lot of sword and sorcery back in the day, and I really read a lot. In high school, I was particularly interested in this. I think that having a woman character, having her own name on the comic was significant at the time, and I was interested in it for that reason. I wasn't interested in her physical appearance and that aspect of the comic to get men to read the comic. I've always been interested in a woman heroine standing up for herself, and I saw her, and maybe it's because my father was in first fandom and introduced me to Sailor's Gerald L as a comic book version of Gerald, but with a different name and coming, I knew there was some connection to the Howard universe. So I think that it's just significant, period, that she had her own book, and then she had her own film in the 80s, and I guess she has her own film now, but in the 80s at the time of Coleman. So
Yeah,
I'm not sure
I
that
like the movie in the 80s.
how influential she actually was on the genre, I can't say.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I'm sorry. I'm kind of a lit history nerd, and so I throw in questions that I want to answer. That you can see many tropes in female-led action that start with Red Sonja. The preponderance of vengeance as a way to make a largely male audience find female violence palatable. The bikini, let's face it, she had the very first chainmail bikini, and that is big. Look around the convention, and if you take a shot every time you see a chainmail bikini, I will have to rush you to the emergency room. But why do you suppose, let's talk a little bit about the problematic origin story. Because for modern literary scholars, a feminist critique of fiction, Red Sonja's sexual violence origin story is seen as problematic. And me personally, I find it problematic in the original story that she couldn't lift her brother's sword, and so she's helpless. And I'm like, you can do a lot more than. Anyway, sorry. I know she was also very young and weak. But what I find interesting is that the comics reboot that happened recently and the new movie rewrite that origin story. Does anyone want to talk about that? Maybe John?
Well, I mean, the new movie pretty much gives her a new origin story. It has nothing to do with her being assaulted or training under Skaha, or receiving the Gias, which is like one of the things that's the hallmark of the characters. She can't lay with a man who's not bested her in battle. That's and that's based on Gias from Skaha, which actually that trope, if you will, is very common in things like Celtic mythology.
It's also very common in early sword and sorcery and early fantasy. Andre Morton used it a lot. Female wizards couldn't cast if they had had sex. And I think some of it has to do with the very real reality of women in a patriarchy that once you got married, you lost a lot of your rights. I don't know if it's this is my TED Talk. But Anya, you had discovered some cool information.
Well, I have, and I haven't. I apologize because I have had a week and I haven't had a chance to delve into it. But you will find if you, with your friend Google, that if in July of 2025 there was an interview with Claire Noto, who has the co-writing credit on the original Red Sonja. Claire Noto, how many people have heard of her?
This would be the
yeah, first one.
1985 movie?
No, this is the comic book.
Oh, the
the
comic
Roy
book,
Thomas
sorry.
comic
The
book.
comic, oh, the Roy Thomas
Roy
comic
Thomas,
books.
yeah, well, Roy Thomas has the co-writing credit, and she says he basically was an editor. Although she, I haven't gone all through it, she fought back against, really tried to push back against the TNA aspects and many of these aspects of Red Sonja. I really want to read, this is a very long interview. She was a screenwriter, and she worked for ABC. She was quite a successful screenwriter. She wrote a script called The Tourist, which apparently is one of the top 10 unproduced scripts of all time. It's kind of legendary in that way. And she was dating Steve Gerber of Howard the Duck. And somewhere through this connection, she met Roy Thomas, and he hired her to write. And she says, well, instead of that he wanted to pay her $150 per issue, which was like a real shit page rate for the whole issue, not while he got the main page right. So he really comes across pretty dicky. This is her first side of the story. But you should Google and find this interview on this. She talks a lot about working as a screenwriter and so forth. But there was, she apparently had more, we'll think of Roy Thomas as kind of the force behind Red Sonja. But once you know this, there are many erased women, as you very into.
Oh, you have
there
more?
may be,
You have more?
but if you go back and read this issue, I'd like to go back and read those early issues, which I have not read in years, and see if this changes, if I can see things that she tried to put in there. And I guess the first artist wasn't Barry Windsor-Smith, what's his name, who did the first issue, was very, very sexist, apparently, and pretty creepy, like a dirty old man, she says. So, and she had to deal with all this, and this is not, so in a way, as a woman who read Red Sonja, this actually makes me feel like, wow, all the things that I liked about it, maybe thanks to her, and the things I didn't like about it were thanks to the men involved with it. But just one off comment on this, on the revenge quality. I mean, Gerald, this is not unique.
It's not
to,
unique, no.
It's
but,
not unique
but
to a woman's sort of sorcerer character, because I think a lot of Red Sonja was probably, some of it was influenced by C.L. Miller's Gerald Jury. If you haven't read the short stories like that, which have been it's been relaunched in Molly Cantor now has the rights to continue the Gerald stories officially from the C.L. Miller estate. So this is an exciting time.
So not the first time that a story written by a woman is kind of copied by a man who becomes more successful with it, is what we're seeing here?
In some ways, yes. I mean, there's never been a Gerald Jury movie, for example, unfortunately, and there really should be. Those stories are really amazing. The audiobook version will really tell you, but if you love high fantasy, you love sword and sorcery, and you have not read those stories, you really look them up. She only wrote like 5. It won't take you that much time to.
Awesome. Are they available on archive.org or
I don't know, I would buy the book.
Project Gutenberg?
I don't know,
Okay.
I do the book Black God's Shadow, or there are plenty of book collections of that, and it's nice to buy books. As an author, I'm for you buying the book rather than finding it for free, but if you need to find the first story for free, to get you reading it, I don't disapprove of that. Actually, Weird Tales is online,
Yes,
so you can just go back to the original Weird Tales issues online
those are
and
not
read
pandemic.
it through that way if you wanted to read them in the old school, really cool way that someone would have rediscovered her stories original.
It's on the Internet
Awesome.
Archive.
Yes.
Yeah, the Internet Archive. I'd read it
Yeah.
that way. Don't go to Project Good, go to Weird Tales on the Internet Archive instead.
Okay, so it's interesting because we're talking about stories that have their origins in the 20s and 30s. Why do we think that Red Sonja is having a resurgence now with a brand new movie, with a new comic reboot? What do you think, Gerald?
Oh wow, I could only hazard a guess. I know that it's at least to me it seems that Hollywood is risk averse in the same way that publishing is more and more risk averse, and so they're looking for existing properties to attempt to exploit rather than trying kind of stuff that they haven't tried before, with the hopes that there is a built-in audience that they can draw on. Yeah, so that would be
That would be your
my
guess?
my surmise. I mean,
That
I
it's
don't
just,
know.
it's so old, it's so established, it must be safe. What do you think, John?
Well, I mean, they've, like you said, they're risk averse. They've been recycling IPs for years. You know, not that long ago, they did another Conan movie
Yeah.
with Jason Momoa. But
And
so-
actually, Rose McGowan was supposed to play Red Sonja in that film,
Oh,
Yes.
the
but
whole,
she was injured and was unable to do that, so they adjusted it and changed the character that she ended up playing.
well, I mean, in the Red Sonja movie that just came out, that's actually been done for like 2 or 3 years, and they finally just now released it. And evidently, it went through a whole series of writers and actors attached to it. You know, at one point, I think it was like Amber Heard was supposed to play Red Sonja.
Oh no.
There's someone else. And they kept changing writers. But anyway, so they had been looking to recycle this for a while because, you know, like you said, there's a built-in audience. And why take a risk on a brand new property like, say, you know, my urban fantasy series?
Not all.
You know, that when you have this property that you're going to assume has a built-in audience, but that also gives them a catch-22, because in order to draw in that audience, they have to at least play in part to the original, you know, tropes and expectations. So, you know, for example, if they tell you that, okay, well, the new Red Sonja movie is, you know, all about female empowerment, well, then they also didn't look at the movie stills, because she's still in the little scale mail bikini.
Yeah, and I also do medieval reenactment combat, and let me just say, it's like they only armor the parts that you don't really armor.
I also wonder if if it may have been a case that sometimes also happens that a company needs to produce something to hold on to the rights
Well, that
at a
is
certain point.
quite possibly true, and it may also be cheaper for them to get the rights to an older IP like
Things
you know,
that came
Red
out
Sonja.
before Disney rewrote the copyright laws.
Right.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. I feel like we've gone down a weird rabbit hole. Normally we wait till the end for questions, but I want to get a feel for you, audience. Is there something that you really want us to talk about? Any questions? Oh, we have one right here.
So I was given the recommendation of checking out Red Sonja 2 or 3 months ago. When I saw this panel, I was like, oh, I'll check it out. So I know nothing about Red Sonja. So I want to kind of get like, what's a good starting point to kind of get into the universe of Red Sonja?
I'm repeating the question, just in case anybody had trouble hearing. What is a good starting point for a new fan to get into Red Sonja?
I think that depends on what your interest really is. If you're interested in Robert E. Howard's work, well, and we'll probably discuss this.
I think Anya has an answer.
It has
No,
nothing to do with sword and sorcery.
Mhm.
The original Red Sonja. So you can find Shadow of the Vulture easily. If you want to go into the comics, then it depends what era of the comics you want to get into. I would recommend doing some searching online to find where they start.
Oh, I could Google it.
And also, you don't have to go for like one that's a collector's issue, because those back issues would be pricey. Look possibly, hit like half-price books for collecting works, things like that.
Yeah, I think probably if you want to probably like know what Red Sonja was, you should go back to the Roy Thomas edited Clarinotto, because then you'll see the origin of it, which I imagine is collected into some affordable edition. That would be where it would start. But I understand I have not read as many of the newer ones. Of the newer, you may go, oh wow, I'm tired of that, and go through. But she first appeared in a Conan. Was it Barry Windsor-Smith?
Yes.
Who did the Conan, the Richard? That's what I thought. So maybe that's where you start. Is the Marvel? You find the Marvel Conan where she first appeared, and see how they did her before you look at the actual comic. But my understanding is the more recent ones handle it very differently. Although I think some of them had some very questionable art. And if you don't like the art, don't read it. That's what I'd say. If it's a comic, if you don't like the art, don't read it.
Yeah, right. One other thing I find interesting as a historian of literature is watching the male gaziness fluctuate up and down in the Red Sonja comics. Some of the early work is actually not too terrible on a page-by-page basis. But also maybe I'm a little blind to I think I came into it blind to male gaze because I was so used to it. I wasn't thinking of her looking sexy because I'm not attracted to women. It was just a woman-shaped thing that was moving around in front of the hot guys. But I'd recommend the movie.
The new one or
Which
the old
one?
one?
The 83 or 225?
Okay. Are we gonna get in a fight?
Fight!
No, that's a very good question because it depends on what you're looking for. I watched both movies recently, and neither one is a cinematic masterpiece. But the 80s one does hit kind of that nostalgia, and it's very much a product of its time, but it still has that nostalgia piece to it. And that may be because, I saw it when it first came out when I was young, and it does have Arnold Schwarzenegger, who carries a lot of charisma into the movie.
Charisma and biceps. Yes.
Yes.
They work together.
We have a wonderfully patient person here on the front row.
Well, I just have a question. The movie was released in the U.S. for like a day.
Yes, and I saw it on that day.
Yeah. Oh, good for you. It's like I think.
Super fan right here.
Yeah.
The only one who belongs on the panel.
To be fair, it was home with this Pam. I was like,
All right.
I'm gonna be on Pam. I should watch that movie.
Yeah, I just looked it up. You can find it on Prime. In case you're wondering.
That was the other thing that gave me the kind of thought that maybe some of this was about copyright, because it was, they only had it in the theater for one day. So that's the kind of thing you do, I think.
They did not invest in the distribution. They were just they probably didn't invest much in the movie. They just invested in keeping their thumb on it.
I thought we were trying to Oscar qualify it.
All right.
Best costume.
I just wanted to comment on him. I've read a lot of the Red Sonja, so the Adventures of Red Sonja compiles a lot of the early works from with Conan and Cull and then her own stories. Gail Simone has written a lot. She's done a lot of good Red Sonja. She has a recent novel.
Gail Simone's recent. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
I'm repeating just in case people can't hear you.
yeah, so that's another place you could start. Gail Simone has a lot of the comics, which are excellent, and then the novel. I have my opinions, but she's well known for writing Red Sonja, so that's also something.
Yeah, Gail Simone is a great comics writer overall. Good call.
And now in the red shirt.
I would say the Frank Thorne issues of Marvel are the epitome of what we know as Red Sonja. There's no doubt about it.
The Frank Thorne issues of Marvel.
Yeah, so that's all the 70s stuff.
Yeah, the 70s.
Yeah.
I understand completely. Spider-Man.
I've never heard of Jor-El before.
Yeah, can you spell that?
Gerald, J-I-R-E-L. Gerald of Jory, J-O-I-R-Y. And the first story is Blackguard's Kiss. oh, Black God Shadow comes before Black. I think it's Black God Focus and then Black
If you
God
look
Shadow.
up the name, you'll find the list, I'm sure.
But you read them, you should read them in order because they follow a transition. And she's been spurned, and she is taking revenge on this lover, king, whatever it is. And it's written in a. When I wrote, I was gonna say, I listened to audio, reviewed it when I was writing a story that I have in here, which is the closest, really, the fantasy story called Jasmine, to get a feel for moving quickly through a fantasy world. Because those quests, they just take forever. So, but how do you move? You need to write it as a short story or novella. You need to get someone somewhere, and she gets you there. It's through a fantastic landscape, a really weird, and that's where it crosses over into weird fiction, this fantastic landscape, and it's fast moving as she travels through it. And if you read Steele, and I think that's like one of the strengths of her writing, her travel. This is not the quest where they're stopping to eat lunch. She's going, she's determined, she's going to do this, and it's really weird in a really cool way.
Now, as an author, I imagine you have feelings about the skill it takes to write those journeys.
Oh, it's like really hard to like move somebody fast. So you want to write fantasy in the short form, and you need someone to travel. It's like, how do you do it? Yeah, it's challenging because usually it's a quest and an epic, and you need to do that. But you need to get somebody through I tried to get through. I was like a Fey world. And that doesn't, how do you get that? How do you make it weird? How do you make someone feel like they're in a different, not on Earth, somewhere else?
Right.
That's really weird and strange, yeah.
Yeah, but not stopping to describe every tree, Tolkien.
But I'm not sure that Red Sonja, the comic, necessarily does that.
Well, it's
although it does have its weird, does cross over into Robert E. Howard, and Conan definitely has its weird fiction elements, so it does. To a certain extent.
I was going to recommend a series of short stories, novels, and novellas by Lee Brackett.
The other classic.
Yes.
You see, who also
Secret
co-wrote
of Cinderella.
Empire Strikes Back.
Yes, she co-wrote Empire Strikes Back. She did a lot of writing for Hollywood. Secret of Cinderella is my favorite novella of hers, and it is on Project Gutenberg for free, or on LibriVox.org as a free audiobook. And she is also a early female pulp writer who does an amazing job of getting her hero. I'm blanking on his name. It's like
John Stark.
What?
Eric John Stark.
Eric John Stark. Thank you. Everyone else copied her name. Getting him from Mercury to Venus to Mars, and across these barren landscapes or seas or marshes very well. Sorry, I'm a writer and I got excited. I always bring up the quote from Virginia Woolf, who said she spent an entire weekend trying to get her family in her novel up a flight of stairs. So let's get back on topic, Marie. You're the moderator. Moderate. I'm curious because the Wikipedia page, I haven't seen the new movie, and the Wikipedia page says that they changed her backstory, but they don't say what they changed it to. Is it a spoiler, or can you share?
Well, I mean, it's a little spoiler, but it's the first thing in the movie.
If it's the first thing in the movie, it's not a spoiler.
But basically, her village is attacked and wiped out. She escapes and grows up living in the woods, so she's a very, I don't want to say she's not feral, but she's very, very in touch with nature.
Oh, they made her a wild child.
Yeah, with a horse.
Okay.
But the same start as the Conan movie,
I mean,
and that the village was destroyed.
The village
except for he was
destroyed,
kidnapped.
but there was no element of
The sexual assault.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's not in there at all. But they also, well, I'll stop there because again, spoilers.
Yes. You took the first scene. You're good. Help moderator out of ideas.
Well, what about who else read the actual original short story she appeared in?
Why aren't you on this panel, dude?
So what's funny is the original Red Sonja short story has nothing to do with sword and sorcery.
No, it's kind of an alternate, like, ancient past kind of weird.
It's set in the Ottoman siege of Vienna
Yeah.
in the 16th century. So I mean, Red Sonja does have red hair, and she is a Spitfire fighter, but there is no swords, there is no sorcery, there's no chainmail bikini, there is no assault or gas, and she is very much an acting force in the story, but she's not necessarily the central character.
That's interesting. And by the way, thank you for pronouncing the word Gaius, because I've seen that so many years now, and I've never heard anyone say it out loud.
Oh, I can tell my narrator, I'm not guaranteeing that I pronounce anything correctly.
Gerald, I feel like you had something to jump in with.
No, I think that for me, Red Sonja impacted me by in a way, in a different kind of way, in which that as I went through reading particularly fantasy novels, that I was looking for that character, and the character was absent. In the same way that there were no characters that looked like me as protagonists in fantasy. There were very few Red Sonja-like powerful women. I mean, I found Paxenarian, and they're very few and far between. And so for me, having come from reading that, it was very obvious to me in reading, as I continued to read, that there was this other thing that was missing from fantasy, from the entirety of the genre.
Yeah. I also think that, like, the early male writers of female action heroes always felt like they had to over-explain how she could possibly do this. I like that nowadays we have so many properties where a woman can just pick up a sword and say, let's go beat up bad guys.
That's good. If we're talking about other writers, and I agree that there are a few, and she is somewhat later, but Janice Lee also wrote Sword and Sorcery of Women and wrote them very well. Janice Lee, who passed away not that long ago, and there's a wonderful memorial anthology that people I know put together, which why am I blanking? I'll look it up.
While you look up the information on the Tanith Lee Memorial Anthology, I will add that we've circled back to my first question. The impact of Red Sonja on the genre is that someone had to be first, and now we have all of these other people who are like reacting to it, like, oh.
I don't think though that Tanith Lee probably.
It's not necessarily.
She might have reacted to Seal more, but not to.
Well, we can never say what exactly our influences are, but it expands what's possible, expands what's visible, and one of the things you see a lot in the history of literature is a trope appears. Some early 18th century fellow writes about mesmerism and then writes about, Slavic folklore. And then someone else is like, ooh, Slavic folklore and the new science of mesmerism. I'll bring those together and write Dracula. And then a Fritz Lang makes a movie and says, what would be cool would be if Dracula could be killed by sunlight. And then there's 1,000 people writing different vampire stories where vampires are allergic to the sun, when it was just a random thing where Fritz Lang was like, we have to end this movie fast. So while an individual author might not say, oh, I read Sonja, I was influenced by her, I think that you can see her appear, and you can see imitators, and you can see contemporaries, and they play off with each other.
It's Storyteller, a Tanith Lee tribute.
I give you enough time.
Sorry.
No, I was joking. I was like, yes, I gave her enough time. Go on.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic collection of contemporary stories, but you really should go back and read Tanith Lee. And she's written like 70 how many books? 9 books. She's written a lot. But you can go through and find her books. I mean, she would come to World Fantasy Con in her chainmail headdress. She would show up in a chainmail headdress and so forth. If you ever got to see her in person, she wore that very over thing. I would feel, and I mean, that Red Sonja was certainly important, but I think that if you go back in the history of sword and sorcery, she was not the only, there was already some precedents there that took us to here. The absence of women in those roles is certainly notable, though. Although there are, like Gerald L, some in them. And there are quite a few women, actually, by the time you get to the 80s and 90s, who are writing sorcery of one type and another. Storm Constantine also. Gerald, you can recommend some authors. I mean,
yeah, I was about to say, it's like let's
and maybe some contemporary authors who are writing sword and sorcery now that have strong women characters. I know you probably can throw some shadow, have some ideas. In fact, maybe certainly you write compelling fantasy with strong characters, Gerald.
Well, I certainly think that if I looked at my own kind of a journey to writing science fiction and fantasy, that a character like Red Sonja, there's an impact there. Because as I said, there were folk like Margaret Weiss and Tracy. Thank you. And C.J. Cherry and some others who were writing
C.J.
stuff,
Cherry, yes.
right? But even that withstanding, there is still, at least for me as I was reading, seemed to still be a real dearth of the opportunity for there to be. I mean, I'm reading all this stuff and I'm like, where are the strong characters in these stories?
Well, even,
right?
Yeah, and C.J.
so
Cherry
me,
even mostly wrote male protagonists, which was interesting.
So for me, when I got to the point where I was writing, that was certainly a part of the makeup of the DNA of my work in terms of making sure that not only were there characters that looked like me that I found that was also missing, but that the women were strong characters, that they weren't kind of the stereotypical stuff that we saw that we were reading in the 70s and the early 80s. And so I think that to the benefit of us all, I think even now, I mean, there are a lot of people who are writing great stuff now that I think in some ways is a response to what we were all reading in the 70s and 80s.
How about you, John? Do you have any? If you liked Red Sonja, you'll also like.
Well, you'll also like the Milesian Accords because my champion character happens to be a woman who is trained in fighting by Skaha. Sound familiar? Except that I don't have the icky parts that
The icky parts, yeah, fuck that.
And there's no chainmail bikinis.
I mean, if you have a severe shortage of chainmail, I guess they make sense, but. So, here's wait, I almost had another question. Something about, Red Sonja, is she historical fiction? Is she sword and sorcery? Is she weird? How would you define it? Is this just action adventure?
I mean, sword and sorcery technically is fantasy action adventure. I mean, it does have very specific tropes, but I think that's where the early comic book depiction of Red Sonja firmly appears. Now, through different forms of media, that can, change some. For example, Red Sonja was also the ancestor of Mary Jane Watson, if we're in the comics. As in Spider-Man.
Right, yeah.
A direct ancestor.
Yes, and so
from the Ottoman Empire.
So Mary Jane would like channel her or something. I don't even remember the story that she appeared in, but all of a sudden she would channel Red Sonja.
Well, that's the great thing about the comics universe, in that you can always change the universe. You can reboot, you can remix, you can reimagine to match more of whatever appeals to you at the time. So, I admit I did start the panel a little early. I want to make sure that the audience has plenty of time for questions. If there's any questions, feel free to raise a hand. Otherwise, we're going to ask our brilliant authors up here, because Jon took us there, how does Red Sonja impact your work, or how does your work reflect Red Sonja? Gerald?
Oh yeah, as I was saying a moment ago, for me it's really important. I think one of the greatest compliments that I've received about my work is from women who have come up to me and said, I enjoy the way that you write women, that you write them well. And so part of that for me is that evolution of having that background and that history. Because I was always reading on a Saturday or a Sunday a stack of comics and science fiction and fantasy novels, and so it was really apparent to me kind of what was available and what wasn't available. And so when I'm writing female characters, I'm really trying to write them as full human beings and not as stereotypes, and to give them real agency in the plot. And so yeah, I think I definitely can trace that back to when I was reading Conan and then got introduced to Red Sonja and reading, like I said, The Warlord and some other stuff. That in that kind of sword and sorcery, the early sword and sorcery kind of milieu. So yeah, so for me it was about, hey, let's take the best of what this was and get rid of all of the nonsense and move forward and write women characters in depth.
Excellent. Anya, how about you?
I want to be honest, I don't think Red Sonja exactly influenced me directly, but I think as a little girl, I wanted to find a certain kind of character. And certainly when in the world of comics, and my dad introduced me to comics when I was 6 years old, reading Tarzan, the Joe Kubert Tarzans, and I immediately gravitated towards La Opar and thought she was badass, and Silver then reimagined her. And of course, if you are familiar, she's like all the men are basically Neanderthals, and the women are the smart and beautiful, although it's also problematic because here we have white people in the middle of Africa. But I'm 6 years old, and I'm just thinking, because if I like H. Rider Haggard she, that there's this, except for this is she's like Catwoman, she's got a good side to her, We didn't have many choices back then, So for me, Red Sonja, like Vampirella, is one of the female characters out there who's a choice for me to see something in, And I, as a child, I wasn't really looking for sexuality. In fact, that part of it, I would be like, no, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to look in between the lines. But I will say, if anything, like when you're talking about it, in my book, I did not set out to have every character. It's every story except for one story from the point of view of a male dog is from a woman's point of view. And I did not set out it that way, but I tend to write just naturally a story. And people are like, well, why don't you? You really should. And I'm like, why should I? There's a dearth in stories from a woman's perspective. If that's what I'm writing, that's fine. When I want to write something from a male perspective, I'll write it from a male perspective. And there are male characters in there, of various types. But it's all from a female perspective, except for one male dog. There's a story from the dog's point of view, and it's an answer to The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers. So.
I once wrote a short story and only realized after I sold it, the editor who bought it, it was Diabolical Plots bought it, and he emails back and says, I love this story, I'd like to take it for Diabolical Plots. It was really fascinating to me to read a story with so many characters and there's not a single male in it. And I was like, oh, oops.
Other men in my stories.
But I know, I was just thinking it was interesting that you said you don't know why you tend to gravitate to write a female protagonist, but I think you write what you want to write.
Well, in the dog story, there is a woman character who is key. That dog loves this woman. and the dog makes tragic choices, partly because he loves this woman. You
We all
know,
make tragic
he,
choices
you know,
for love.
but that's,
No,
yeah. But I was gonna say one other thing
Yeah.
on the fantasy thing though. If you really are interested in, when I was a child, my father gravitated me towards books by Seymour and Lee Brackett and Anne McCaffrey and Cedar Cherry and Ursula Le Guin. So I had this weird view of science fiction that while I knew it was a boys' club, I knew all the women writers. So I probably thought there were more women writers writing science fiction for that reason, because I had a father who consciously pushed me in that direction, and then he also would buy me these comics that had a woman involved in them. But he also bought me Conan and Tarzan and all that stuff, which is, you know, we see now it's problematic, but
We would have, I feel like this whole audience and panel would have loved my panel yesterday on strong female characters. But, okay, everybody answered the question how your work reflects, right? Not everybody? Okay. I would like us each to take a minute and tell us, we're going to start with Gerald and move back down this way. I want you to tell the audience where they can find you here at DragonCon next, and where they can find you in the greater area, and then plug away.
This is actually my last panel for DragonCon, so I'm happy to end on Red Sonja. So you can find me at GeraldColeman.com. We're easy.
This is also my last panel for DragonCon, which means that probably tonight you can find me in the West End Bar. You can find me online on Amazon under Jon R. Osborne. My website is jonrosborne.com. On Facebook, you find me at Jon R. Osborne. Instagram at Jon R. Osborne. Twitter at Druid Oz because it was before I started writing.
So close.
okay. This is unfortunately not my last panel. I'm an 11:30 social sciences and science fiction tomorrow, which I will make. I've had a journey over the last week, and not a journey, sorcery journey.
How many days were in the last week?
I don't know, like 20,000. I was selling a house,
Oh.
an older home, and it's going to close on Tuesday, but I had to sign legal paperwork on Friday morning and like study them. It talk about horror. It's closed though. It's a house I loved, but I'm moving on to good things. So you can find me at anyamartin.com, ANYA Martin.com, where my not updated website is. But there are links to find my fiction there. You can buy if you want to. I'm very bad at this, but if you're interested, if you liked what I said, you can buy my short story collection. And you can find me also, we've been on a bit of a hiatus, but hopefully are going to be back on the air, hopefully in September, the Outer Dark podcast. And we also do, sometimes we do special events, especially here in Atlanta. We've done an Outer Dark symposium, and which is, a small writer-centric event. Where we really get deep into weird fiction, and Gerald has been a guest and program participant in that. And I hope to one day do another. Scott's finally got his PhD, Scott Nicolay, my partner, and maybe we'll be able to do that. We're in Santa Fe, and we're trying to figure out how to get George R. Martin to help us do this, because we need some. Everything is so much expensive now. To do any events. I mean, DragonCon can do it, but if you do a small event that's really writer intensive, it's expensive now. It's way more expensive, and people won't travel from overseas to come. Things are very complicated in this world. But that's where you can find me. I was also a juror on the Shirley Jackson Awards this year and last year, so I'm fairly well read in a lot of fiction. I'll tell you, there's a lot of great fiction out there right now. Yeah.
Great. Before I do my spiel, I just wanted to ask Gerald, you didn't mention the Afro-Appalachian poetry thing. I wanted you to mention it. That sounds so groovy.
Should I hold up the book that you gave me?
Oh, hold up the book he gave you.
I bought on
Sometimes,
Kickstarter.
sometimes us extroverted authors have to advocate for the introverted authors on our panels. Yeah,
No,
check this out.
the Affrilachian Poets is a group that,
Affrilachian.
that we founded in the late '80s, early '90s at the University of Kentucky. A bunch of us came together, and one of my longtime good friends and one of the other Affrilachian poets, he coined the phrase Affrilachian, taking African and Appalachia and putting them together, and it's been a joy the last 30, 40 years to be a part of that. And we have book award winners, poet laureates, and some of you may have heard Nikki Finney's name, Crystal Wilkinson, and some of the others. And so yeah, it's a poetry collective, and we've been writing poetry for about 30 years.
I'm a big poetry fan, so.
Great, I'm looking forward to reading this poetry collection very much. Gerald's amazing, he's really his epic fantasy. Can I say you should read his epic fantasy? He's not telling you that, so I'm gonna tell you that.
And this John's series sounds absolutely amazing. I write mostly science fiction. I do have one fantasy-esque book, The Gods Awoke, which takes place on a secondary world, and is from a first-person omniscient from the point of view of a goddess who cannot remember past 2 weeks ago. My main line, of course, is the Galactic Hellcats. I have right here, I think this might be the penultimate copy of the original edition. You can buy these from me for $20 right now, right here. You can find me at marievibbert.com and Wikipedia, of all places. I'm still amazed by that. Thank you. You have been an amazing audience. I'm letting us go a little bit early so that we can mix and mingle because, I don't know, I feel like we could talk all day. Thank you.